Hello everybody, my name's Daniel and welcome to my channel. I'm so glad that you all are here. If you've been following my C.S. Lewis book reviews, then you know that we're in the middle of reviewing a set of 8 signature classic books by C.S. Lewis. Here's the box set right here. We're into the thick of it. We're on the home stretch. We're on our way to finishing up here. We only have a few books left. And today we're going to be talking about one of C.S. Lewis's more famous books, the Screwtape Letters. C.S. Lewis has written a fantasy series called The Chronicles of Narnia that we're all aware about. He's written a space trilogy that's lesser known but still amazing. And he's also written a bunch of philosophical Christian books. And one of the most famous books in that category that he's written is called The Screwtape Letters. This book is absolutely incredible. I had a great time. I actually listened to it on Audible. I listened to it twice before I did this video, but I have also read the physical copy in the past. And this book is absolutely amazing. One of the reasons why I think that I enjoy it so much is probably because it is very satirical. When getting into this book for the review, I'm going to be getting into a short summary, kind of talk about what's going on. I'm also going to explain the setup because this book is written very differently than most other books that you've read. And then I'm going to be going over some topics that this book covers. So those 3 things are pretty much what I'm going to be going over today. So let's dive into this wonderful discussion about the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. So the setup for this book is very unique. The setup of this book is that it is a series of letters written from one demon to another. So here's the story. In the world of hell, there are demons with different jobs. They're in charge of doing different things. One job that demons do is called being a tempter. And this new tempter is given what's called their patient. And his whole job is to tempt this patient in order to keep them from going into heaven so that when this guy dies, that he goes to hell. Now, this new tempter named Wormwood is related to one of the more famous demons in hell named Screwtape. Thus, the Screwtape Letters. Are you still tracking? So every chapter in this book is a letter that the Uncle Screwtape is writing to his nephew Wormwood about how to properly tempt this guy, this mortal on earth, in order to keep him from living a fulfilling, satisfying Christian life that would lead to him dying and going to heaven one day. You may think it would have been better if we had the full story, if we would have had a more well-rounded picture instead of just one guy writing all of these letters. But the way that Screwtape fills in the blanks for these letters, he really lets you in on what the nephew's saying, and you can definitely get a grasp and use deductive reasoning to fill in the blanks for yourself and understand what's going on in the conversation. So now that we understand that this is a series of letters written from a demonic uncle to a demonic nephew whose job is to be a tempter, now we're going to talk about this guy that the whole story is all about. So there's this man walking around on Earth. The setting is right before World War II and going into World War II. And he's just living his life while Wormwood is trying to ruin his whole life so that when he dies, he'll ultimately go to hell. And right from the beginning, C.S. Lewis starts to make a very bold point with these letters. So what happens is that Wormwood is trying to really mess this guy's life up. And Wormwood is writing his uncle, at least you can assume what's written based on what Screwtape is writing to his nephew. And you're seeing that Wormwood is focused on grand schemes. He's focused on large, extraordinary sins and terrible, catastrophic events. And when Screwtape talks to his nephew Wormwood, he says, "Okay, let's talk, nephew. So you're obsessed with trying to do all of these crazy things to this man so that his life will be as terrible and catastrophic as possible. But you see, that's not really the best way to lead somebody to hell after they die. In fact, Screwtape takes a much subtler approach. He says that if you're doing all of these great calamities and catastrophes, that it could actually lead him to repentance. The greater sins that you would tempt him into could actually lead him to repentance. But instead of focusing on these great, huge, terrible temptations, what if we focus on just these little things? What if we simply manage to lead him into a lukewarm, meaningless existence? And this is really the theme that carries throughout the entire book. Screwtape writes a letter. Obviously, every chapter is a letter from Screwtape, and you're reading it, and Screwtape goes, Wormwood, you want this to happen. You want this great calamity to happen. You want to tempt him into this great sin, but that's too simple. What if we manage to focus him on these little nuances, keep him distracted, keep him looking not at God, not at hell even. Don't let him know that we're even there, but have him focused on himself. Keep him completely distracted, only focused on worldly things. He can stay happy. He doesn't have to do these great, terrible sins. He can have a fulfilling life to himself as long as he doesn't do anything of great importance and ends his days on his deathbed, having never accomplished anything, having never truly sought God, and he would be good as ours in the end. Screwtape really focuses on warning and saying, yes, Wormwood, you're all excited and you want war to break out because, as I said, the book goes into World War II. But war can actually turn men to God. And then he says, you want to tempt this man into this great sin, but great sin can also lead a man to God. All of these terrible things you're suggesting make a man think. They make him look at his life. They make him rationalize and try to understand what's happening in a greater sense. But to truly lead somebody into hell, the most successful time after time method is to keep them stagnant, running in circles, confused and focused only on himself and inwardly. That theme runs its course throughout the whole book, and I just think that it's brilliant that C.S. Lewis was able to notice something so subtle like that. Christians so often think that it's always the great calamities that crush us, that it's only the great sins that destroy us. But when we look at Paul's life, he was a murderer when he was named Saul. He murdered Christians, and God turned him 360, and he actually became one of the greatest known Christians who wrote much of the New Testament. Screwtape, which is really C.S. Lewis's way of satirically commenting on these things, knows that it's not the great things, it's the small, little things that matter. It's the lukewarm life. Don't do anything great, don't do anything terrible, just stay in the middle of the lane and just wait your time out until you decease. So the whole while, Wormwood is tempting the patient, or the main character in the book. There is a war that's coming up. World War II is beginning. Air raids are happening in the town. They talk about how he has conflict with his mother and how the demons are trying to use this conflict with his mother to keep him thinking about himself, to make him feel bad for himself, and to be the least effective Christian he can be. He becomes a Christian and starts going to church very early on in the book. And then throughout the book, he gets married and starts a life with this person. And through each event that this man goes through, the demons are conspiring. Wormwood is obviously writing to his uncle Screwtape, and Screwtape says, no, Wormwood, what are you doing? You're thinking too big. It's the little things. Let the nagging become a part of his life. Let complaining become a part of his life. Let him think about himself, and slowly everything that he is will fall apart, and he will surely be ours. In the end of the book, one of the air raids ends up killing the main character, but Wormwood was unsuccessful, and Screwtape is completely angered and writing to Wormwood and saying that he made it to heaven. How could you let these things happen? You will surely be punished. And whenever you look at the relationship between Wormwood and Screwtape, Screwtape is this clearly clever, experienced tempter who is used to tempting people and has been doing it for ages. And Wormwood is too big for his britches, is only thinking about things that we would think as Christians would really destroy our lives. Things like war, this stress is too great for me. I can't deal with it. It's going to tear me down. Or this sin. Oh, I made this sin. This is going to be too great for me. I can never come back for it. But Screwtape is wise enough to know those great, terrible things generally, ultimately lead us to God instead of away from him. So I talked about the setup, how it's a bunch of letters from an uncle demon to a nephew demon, all for the purpose of tempting this main character. I talked about the life of the main character, how he becomes a Christian, has some problems, all interpersonal problems, because it just follows his daily day life, nothing crazy happening until the war comes. He gets married, the bombs start falling from the sky, and the demons all the while are trying to tempt him to make him as useless and worthless as possible, hoping that one day he'll die and go to hell. And woven throughout this book are so many great topics that C.S. Lewis touches on. It really is quite amazing the way that C.S. Lewis does this, because yes, you have one thread, the main thread of the main character's life. And then you have another thread, which is Screwtape and Wormwood communicating and talking about how they can ruin this man's life. But all the while, C.S. Lewis is putting in lectures, little sermons, little stories to tell Christians how they should be living by telling them how they shouldn't be living. So throughout the whole story, C.S. Lewis is inserting these lessons, these themes by Screwtape telling Wormwood what he should make the main character do. So if the demon wants this man to do this, you can inverse whatever that thing is, and that can really give you a lesson of what not to do. He really makes you think about trivial sins in a complex way. One of these topics that they talk about is gluttony. Wormwood is simplistic. He thinks gluttony is just eating too much, and maybe he can make his patient eat too much, then he'll be in sin and they'll be winning. But Screwtape, being wise and ancient and knowing, says you're thinking about things in such a simple way. It's so much better to do it in a way that makes them think they're actually in the right. He brings up the patient's mother and says, she is a glutton. She is a slave to her stomach, yet she does not eat too much. See, whenever she's served food, she says, oh no, I cannot eat all of that. I just want it like this. She's very picky. She needs everything to be a certain way. But she doesn't eat in excess. She is just so picky in a way that her stomach is still controlling her heart and her mind. So no, she doesn't grow large and fat. No, she's not eating in excess. In the end, even though she doesn't fit the basic stereotype for gluttony, her stomach is still ruling her mind. And I think it's interesting to think that while we know these basic sins, you could think like the 7 deadly sins in these very simplistic ways, there are so many nuances, and C.S. Lewis wraps it all up to, are you looking at yourself, focusing on yourself, living for yourself? Or are you looking at God and focusing on God and living for God? And is that what you care about? In the end, all of the lessons that he teaches could be summed up in look less at you and more at God. Some of these other life lessons that C.S. Lewis goes over are, he talks about false humility, he talks about lust, he talks about gluttony, he talks about focusing on Christianity in a way that's not Christianity. So let's say, instead of following Christ, I follow Christ and politics. Instead of following Christ, I follow Christ and this idea or that idea. Never just follow God and follow Christ. No, we must always add something to it so that in the end, you're distracted. You're only focusing on this so much as it serves you. You use Christianity as a tool to fulfill your political ideas. You don't actually live for Christ. You're only using it to serve yourself. That's pretty much the gist of the book. Please don't think that by watching this video, you know what C.S. Lewis said in this book. The words, the paragraphs, the pages, the chapters that C.S. Lewis organized into this beautiful book are full of such deep, meaningful lessons. Now understand that it is written in a way that's satirical, so you have to do a little bit of understanding, a little bit of digging to truly get the concept that he's talking about. But the basic way to do that is if the demon says it's good, it's bad. If the demon says it's bad, it's good. I would definitely recommend this book to anybody that wants to read a book by C.S. Lewis involving Christian values. This is not one of his apologetic books. This is not one where he's trying to defend the faith. This book is all about Christian values. It's all coming from the angle of a demon tempting somebody on earth. And through each of those temptations, we can learn to think more complexly about the sin in our life. And remember to not be lukewarm, stagnant, living life for what the world tells us to care about, for what everybody else is living their lives for. But instead, this book reminds us that we're supposed to be focusing on God, that we have a greater purpose to be paying attention to, and that the more we focus on ourselves, the less effective we will truly be in serving God and becoming more like Christ. So the Screwtape Letters is an absolutely fantastic book. I definitely recommend you get it. It's only one of the 8 books in this C.S. Lewis signature classic that I'm going through. I'm definitely going to put links up above as to where you can watch my other videos, because the other books are about philosophy, apologetics, fiction as well. And all of these books are incredibly deep, incredibly thoughtful, and full of amazing lessons from C.S. Lewis, such an inspirational, brilliant man. You can find a link to purchase the Screwtape Letters down in the description below, and you can also find a link to purchase the C.S. Lewis Signature Classic box set down in the description below. I highly recommend that you check those things out. These books are incredible. Yes, they were written almost 100 years ago, but they are so impactful and speak on so many situations that happen today. They're not dated. They're not useless because they're old. They are speaking directly to our time now today. I just started a new Instagram for this YouTube channel. I'm doing it so that I can put book quotes out there. You guys can see what I'm reading. You guys can see what I'm going to be talking about in the future. So go ahead and follow that and follow me on Instagram. That way you can see what I'm up to and see what's happening in the future. I hope that you're reading these books. Yes, I'm giving you a description, but there's so much more in the depths of these pages. I'm glad that you guys are here. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, smash that subscribe button. I hope that you guys have an absolutely fantastical, wonderful day. Have a great day, guys.